Okay. Okay, are you two okay if we could get started? Just in the presence of time?
Ready
Lena
to
and
go?
Mark? Yeah, good to go? Okay. Okay, so I'll start by saying good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Acclaim Advantage webinar called Leading People, Building Culture, and Thriving Through Change. Thank you for joining us. We're really excited about today's conversation and the perspectives from our panelists and what they'll be sharing with us. Just to let everybody know, as they're joining, this session will be recorded. So if you don't want to be on the recording, please turn off your camera. Thank you so much. Today's webinar we have slotted for about 1 hour. Our panel discussion will run approximately 45 minutes, and we'll leave time at the end for any questions from any of you. So please feel free to enter the chat, or we can come off mute at the end. We also have more Acclaim Advantage webinars coming up. So if you're interested in joining any future sessions, you can view our upcoming topics and register online at acclaimability.com/webinars. And at the end of the seminar, I can provide that link in the chat as well. Okay. To get started, I really wanted to set the tone and talk about 3 core truths to frame today's conversation. Change is constant. Organizations are no longer preparing for change. They're leading through it every day. Leadership matters. The everyday actions of leaders shape trust, culture, and employee experience. Culture is intentional. So strong workplace cultures don't happen by chance. They build through consistent leadership and meaningful connections. So when we bring all 3 of those things together, it raises important questions such as how can organizations lead while building cultures where both people and businesses can thrive? And that's what we're really here to talk about today and explore with our 2 panelists. So very pleased to be joined by our 2 incredible HR leaders who bring a wealth of experience and perspective to this conversation. Lena Verma, she's the head of HR at Sodexo North America, and Mark Spencer, sorry, I forgot to put the chat, Executive Vice President, People and Culture at University and Health Network. So I'd love to pass it on to the both of you to introduce yourselves rather than re-meeting your full bios. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your current role, and the career journey that brought you to where you are today. So Lena, maybe you can start. You can tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got here.
Thanks, Lena, and real pleasure to be here joining the Acclaim Advantage series. I know you mentioned, we both Mark and I bring a lot of HR experience or experience of in this profession, but we also have shared experience. So, without getting into too many details, Lena Verma, I'm the head of HR for Sodexo North America, and I've had the absolute pleasure of actually working in Mark's team, reporting to him. So, it's also a double pleasure here because, sharing the forum with him. So thank you, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Lena. Yeah, I don't know if it's coincidental or just interesting, but yes, Lena and I did work together for many years at Rivera, and so I'm currently at University Health Network, the head of we call it People and Culture, but you can call it HR if you want. But prior to that, worked at Rivera for about 13 years. So I worked in the insurance industry for about 5 years, worked in retail for 5 seconds, and had started my HR career actually in the transportation and logistics business. So I've bounced around a little bit, but happy to be part of the panel today and talk about change and leadership.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Sounds like you 2 are a dynamic duo, if I may say so. So I'd like to start with leadership. Workplaces changed significantly over the past 5 years specifically. Leaders have been having had to navigate changing employee expectations, new ways of working, technology, and a pace of change that doesn't seem to be slowing down. So from your perspective, what has fundamentally changed about leadership over the past 5 years, and what has remained timeless, in your opinion? Whoever would like to start first.
Yeah, I can go. I think, Lena, before we talk about what has changed about leadership, I think we also have to recognize the context in which we lead, and organizations have to deliver or perform has also changed. So the speed of change itself has multiplied. There's been technology advancements. I think in front of us we have seen so many different technologies come in and go, and now we are seeing AI invade our ways of working. There's been change in external factors like the geopolitical conditions. we can talk about COVID, the other political environment has shifted both south of the border and globally as well. Um, all of that has an impact on how you lead your teams, how you lead business, how you lead organizations. I think what has remained consistent is communication. How you reach out to your employees. I think that has not changed and will not change, especially when you are dealing with the speed of change that we are. I think communication has become even more important. The human connection is even more valued at this point. When you are managing teams that are working remote, that are hybrid, you have all sorts of dynamics at play. So the human connection, regardless of what technology we use, that won't change. And leading with empathy, really recognizing and understanding what people are dealing with, or what is affecting their work. Because when you see someone, they are bringing their whole self. It's not just someone who's doing a job. It's a person who's doing a job which is within their professional setting, but there is a person that's outside of that. So having that empathetic view on people is also very important, and I think it's timeless. And then, I think it's table stakes now, the societal conditions, and, especially if you're operating in Canada or North America, we have very diverse workforce. So the culture or sense of belonging, I think that was always there, but it's even more important now, especially in this time and day. I think, the fundamentals have not changed that much. Mark?
Yeah, I would agree with everything Lena said. I think the way I see this question is things are changing more quickly. There's some very large changes happening. Geopolitical changes in particular are, I think, in some ways unique to for a lot of organizations. At the UHN, in this hospital right now, we often talk about the geopolitical environment as being one of the more significant changes and biggest challenges that we've ever experienced. Some people would say it's even more challenging than COVID, which is quite a statement for a healthcare organization. But we have colleagues who are in conflict right now because of things that are happening halfway around the world, and it's been very, very disruptive and very difficult. But I agree with Lena. Like, I think the core pieces of leadership, engaging people, clearly communicating, relentlessly clearly communicating, providing clarity around why we're doing things and what we're trying to accomplish, respecting people's differences and keeping an open mind, and continually trying to find the win-win solution to the problems that we're trying to solve. That stuff is still very important. What's changed is you have to be even more intentional, more focused, and more skilled than maybe you had to before, because you layer in, again, healthcare, you layer in COVID and the post-COVID changes, you layer in prevalence of remote and hybrid work, you layer in geopolitical changes, you layer in technology changes and AI disruptions, and AI is a great one because a lot of staff are really ambivalent about AI. They all use it at home, although they're kind of suspicious or sometimes even dismissive of it. And they're almost afraid to use it at work because they think it may take their job away or a piece of their job. And so there's a bunch of new types of challenges that need to be addressed in a very intentional, focused way, but the core is still the same. And so it really just means leaders just have to be on their game, even more so than in the past.
Yeah, that's very interesting. While the environment around leaders continues to change, many of the fundamentals of good leadership remain incredibly important, right? So communication, empathy, connection, and really being able to navigate. That's very interesting. Thank you. Anything else to add before I switch to the next question?
I mean, I would just say on the horizon, and without turning this into an AI conversation, because that's probably what most conversations are these days, Another interesting thing that I think we'll all have to start dealing with is as AI starts to come into workplaces, what's going to happen is the value of knowledge is actually going to decrease, right?
Mhm.
Because knowledge is going to be much more easily available. You still need judgment to know what's right, and you still need judgment to sort of um, ask the right questions. But knowledge is becoming more commoditized. And so
Mhm.
leaders who have relied on knowing the answers in the past will find that that is not a stable platform to build their practice on. So I think
Yeah.
that's something that has, in some respects, has yet to be fully felt.
Yeah, I agree with you. I like to switch to culture. So culture is often something that is tested during periods of change. What do the most effective leaders, in your opinion, do differently to build trust and strengthen culture during uncertain times?
You want to trade? I'll take this one first.
Sure, Mark,
Sure,
that would be great.
absolutely. Go for it.
Well, so I mean, I guess this is similar in some ways, although it focuses on culture, which is in some respects broader than just leadership, right? But I think that there's a similarity here, which is that some things aren't changing; they're just maybe more challenging to be able to execute effectively. Um, I mean, and culture is really the shared, often implicit set of expectations about behavior, right? What's the old cliche? Culture's, how we get things done around here.
Mhm.
But it's often not written down, or if it is written down, it sometimes doesn't resonate with people. And so people learn culture from watching other people, right? That's the way this place works. If you change jobs, you felt that. It's like, wow, people don't do that thing that they used to do at my last place. They all
Mhm.
do this thing now, or no one gets away with that anymore here, or that kind of stuff. And so you often find, or you experience culture through behaviors, not through formal communications or plaques on the wall or those kinds of things. And so for leadership to support culture and to strengthen culture, it comes down to behavior and walking the talk, this acting in a way that's aligned with the culture of the organization, the real ones, not the accidental ones, is really important. And then leaders have an obligation to help manage cultural exceptions in the behavior of others. So what you what's the expression? What you permit, you promote, right?
Mhm.
And so if you're not challenging things that are not culturally aligned, your culture will slide into that and it will become that thing that you don't want it to be. And so in terms of change, people are under more stress, they're under more pressure, they have many competing demands on their time and attention. But if culture is an advantage to an organization, if it's a differentiator, if it's something that sets you apart, it really has to be something that leaders pay attention to, or else that advantage will disappear.
Yeah. And how do you find that a little bit more difficult in such a remote type of world now, like leading by example and showing culture, through a screen?
Certainly. I mean, that's part of the conversation about how much remote is the right amount,
Hmm.
and what do people miss if they're not, present with each other in a human physical way, or in real life, as we sometimes say, because I think you do lose some of the richness of that experience. But I mean, it's on the other hand, there are techniques, right? There are ways to lead hybrid meetings. There are ways to connect with people as we are doing here
Right.
through technology. But similar to the last question, I think there's an aspect of it which is it's just has to be much more intentional than in the past because of these other barriers and filters.
Yeah, it's different, definitely. Something definitely different to navigate. Lena?
Yeah, no, I will echo whatever Mark has said. And actually, I'm going to steal the line that he said, what you permit, you promote. So that was a good one. But, I think we cannot stress enough the importance of communication. I think communicate, especially when
Mhm.
you're going through periods of significant change. And, I think many of us have gone through, and certainly Mark and I in our previous world, I mean, there were many periods of change, with the whole transition of our business and, COVID, post-COVID, like there were many, and even in the current environment where you're trying to reset the organization to perform and, different operating models and things like that. I think where I focus and I value in leaders is, trust begins, I don't know if anyone has read that the Harvard Business Review article, which is Begin with Trust. It's a triangle, and the three parts of the triangle are authenticity, empathy, and logic. So, you can build trust regardless of the level of change you are dealing with, if you show up as real you. I think it's very important, that people who see you in that capacity, they see you as who you are, so there's the real you. So there is definitely power to authenticity. Empathy, I can't stress enough about it. Coming out of healthcare, having spent tremendous amount of time in healthcare actually over my career, and especially through COVID, the importance of empathy and really showing care about the person, and showing care about their success is so important. So, in all of this, and, I think you had this on your first slide, Lena, change is constant. And I think that's something that we all have to accept and move on with. But in all of this, I think if we can show that genuine care, that goes a long way. And finally, logic, trusting people that they can do it, that, they have what it takes, showing the confidence in them. I think that mobilizes the team, that brings inner confidence in the team, that builds trust, and that helps to accelerate change, but change in a way that is accepted. I mean, there will always be roadblocks. So I think I would emphasize that, the authenticity, the empathy, and showing belief in your team members is powerful, especially, when you're dealing with transformation and periods of change.
Yeah, absolutely. To put you on the spot, do you guys have any examples that you'd like to share where you've seen such an impact?
I mean, there are many, I think Mark and I can share a common example. I'm sure, we were at Rivera, we had two lines of business. One was long-term care, and the other one was retirement, which is independent, a private sort of senior care, service offering. And both lines of business transitioned out. And, those were huge for the organization. It was an organization of 22,000 employees, and, you're parceling one half of it in one direction and the other in the other direction, and, going through that change and making sure that there was no disruption in the business. And, what Mark said actually is very true, that, what you permit, you promote. I mean, people deal with emotions, and emotions can play out in different ways. And if you start permitting and allowing certain behaviors to play out during change, that can be very disruptive. So, managing the core, managing the culture or the values and certain standards in the organization while you're in the thick of implementing these massive changes is so important. And, I mean, I think HR plays a significant role during that period, right? Like right from how to maintain engagement, but how to make sure that the business priorities are not compromised. We are currently, in my current organization, we are going through a massive workforce transformation. It's happening globally, but North America is the largest market share. So the biggest impact is in this region. And we are making sure that we have a core team that is staying close to the mandate, and they have the information or enough information to stay informed, but also to mobilize their teams when they have to implement change. So I think those are some examples, but Mark, you may have more.
Well, I was actually just going to add on to your example of our time at Rivera when near the end of that, where it was actually the board decided to basically get out of the business, and so we were essentially, it's a bit more complicated, but essentially selling off parts of it to other operators. And the first part of that transaction was the announcement of that long-term care would be going. And to Lena's earlier comments about the vital importance of communication, we were very, very diligent and, to use the word I've used before, intentional about communication, as transparent as we possibly could be, explaining the reasons that we were doing this and what was going to happen with people and all the steps along the way. And one, I think, at the time, pleasantly surprising fact was that in this transition period, which took almost 2 years, because there were technology things happening and legal agreements happening and a bunch of different things going on and transfer of employees, et cetera, we continued with our annual employee engagement survey. The long-term care group, their overall engagement went up in the middle of that, not down. You would have thought that maybe it would have gone down. People would have been worried about their future. They would have been disappointed about leaving the organization they had hired on to. It went up. And so I think that just shows that if you really do a good job of communicating and being transparent, that you can strengthen your culture and support people.
Yeah, and the idea of trust and how employees experience leadership is so important.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Next question. So there's one area where has become increasingly visible is employee well-being. We've seen a lot of well-being move beyond being viewed as simply an HR initiative and more becoming much more of a broader organizational priority. So from your perspective, what leadership practices have you seen that have made the biggest or the greatest impact on employee well-being?
I can go first, Mark.
Your turn.
So I think, well, I mean, there are many parts to it. One is, right, starting from, making sure that you have the right environment for employees to feel that their well-being is a priority, right? Like if you don't have, for example, if you don't have psychological safety in the organization or a culture where people feel comfortable speaking up, or they don't feel that there is fairness or respect in the environment, no matter how many programs, initiatives you have, one will never feel safe. And safety is such an integral part of one's well-being, right? Like you have to have that sense of safety. I think once you have those sort of fundamental or foundational principles in place, we've seen it both ways. We've seen some in-house practices, but also partnering with the right partner. I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm promoting Acclaim here, but I mean, you guys have been our partners, whether it was Rivera and now in Sodexo, aligning with our values, aligning with our priorities, and making sure that the programs that we are setting up are living those values as well. So I think, but I will go back to the fundamentals here, right? Having the right level of policies, practices, a sense of psychological safety. So even programs like, I mean, a confidential helpline or a speak up or something like that creates that sense of safety for people, so they can bring sensitive matters forward. I think creates a culture of safety and respect. And I think that's very important to, I'm speaking as an employee as well, that yes, it is important to the organization.
Yeah, thank you, Leah.
Yeah, I can add a little bit to that too. I mean, I think this is a really interesting question because it is I think it's a growing and emerging area in some ways, and I think there's also probably slight diversity of opinion of what well-being actually amounts to in some ways. There's a lot of different things that are packed into there, and one way that I tend to think of it, which isn't perfect, but it's sort of a working model, is it's sort of a combination of engagement strategies and understanding the importance of that with a little bit of what used to be called wellness strategies, looking after people's well-being both physically and psychologically. So psychological safety is a very important piece of that, as Lena mentioned, but actually getting into much more detailed things that really affect the experience of work. right? And so one of the things that well-being does is look at the whole person, and look at the whole experience. And a piece of that is it's the old pebble in the shoe analogy, right? Like you could have a 100 great things going on, but if there's something that's just annoying you and you can't get rid of it, it'll destroy the experience of a bunch of other things. And so sometimes it's just little stuff, right? Sometimes they're operational things. Sometimes they're just manager behavior. But all of those things affect the quality of the experience, which then affects people's joy at work or lack thereof, which then may even spill over into mental health, stress reactions, etc. Certainly, there was a lot of that happening through COVID and post-COVID. I think the world is mostly recovered from that now, but there's a legacy and a memory of some of that. And so I think what the focus on well-being now is really that we have to go deeper into some of these things. We have to be more detailed, and we have to engage the organization even more fully than before to find the things that are fundamentally dissatisfying or dysfunctional. And because you can have gym memberships, or you can have on-site gyms, and you can have great benefit plans, but they don't always, and the literature will show this, they don't always produce incredible increases in health and wellness for people. But if you fix operational problems, if you communicate more effectively to tell people what's going on or why something isn't the way they like it, it can remove a lot of confusion, anxiety, pressure, and overall dissatisfaction, and that's what produces well-being fundamentally. And so it's really just a slight turning of the paradigm or the prism through which we look at the employees' well-being and their work experience. But it really is an interesting challenge to go deeper and go broader in terms of working on behalf of employees and their experience.
Yeah, that's very interesting. The employee well-being isn't just about the programs and the organization offers, it's also shaped by how employee experiences work on an everyday basis.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Leaders are operating in a lot of complex environments. They're responsible for supporting employees and their people. So as organizations are constantly balancing business priorities with the needs of their people, how can leaders navigate competing priorities while continuing to build trust, engagement, and healthy workplace culture? I think you touched on it a little bit earlier, Lena, but if you want to expand on it.
I thought we were taking turns, but okay, I can go first.
Tag you're in.
I'm happy
Go,
to
Mark.
start. I'm happy to start with this one. Yeah, so it's another great question. I mean, of course, balancing priorities in general is one of the challenges of leadership. I was at dinner last night with some of our fellow executives, and this came up at the dinner table. Like, are we trying to do too many things at once? Are we focusing on the right things? How do we make sure that the initiatives we start end up sticking and lasting, because we then move on to something else? And I'm sure everybody's had at least one experience about, oh, that was last year's program, or remember when we used to do that? Yeah, why do we stop? And so it's a real challenge. It's a challenge that's part of sort of human psychology. It's a challenge about attention bandwidth and a bunch of other things. And in the middle of that are employees, right? And so when the leadership team feels like they're losing focus or bouncing around, the employees are generally feeling it much, much more greatly, because they don't always have the same context and they don't always understand as deeply all the reasons. And so I think part of the answer is, and I don't know if anyone's ever really mastered this, but I think part of the answer is being clear about what you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it. That's super helpful for people. It actually provides, in some cases, a decision framework, right? So why am I doing this? Is this really important? What am I trying to accomplish? If I have a general sense of why and what we're trying to accomplish, then it's much easier to make sense of the things that I'm being asked to do, and it's empowering for me to be able to figure my own way through this sometimes confusing maze. The other thing, though, is that a healthy workplace will include the well-being, the experience of employees as one of the priorities. It's not the only priority, priority. Organizations exist to achieve a purpose, and the purpose is almost always broader than providing a great employee experience. But if that's not one of the priorities, then it can be easily lost. And so I think the bottom line in my mind is there's a bunch of different priorities. There's a bunch of challenges. Organizations are continually responding to challenges to achieve their objectives, but the engagement and the well-being of employees has to be one of those priorities all the time, where it can very easily be lost.
Thank you, Mark. Lena, anything to add?
Yeah, no, I think Mark's covered all main points. One of the things that I would also like to add, for leaders, I mean, whether it's leaders, I think one of the things that we as leaders need to communicate, I think more boldly, is that all functions, all roles, all jobs exist to serve the business. The business doesn't exist to serve functions. I mean, of course, if the business is doing well, it serves everything else in the organization. So making sure that business priorities or business is at the core of decision making. And by that, I mean connecting the work with why and what needs to happen to enable the business is so important. So again, going back to communication, in explaining why certain things need to happen or why there are certain priorities to the best of the knowledge that can be shared is important. And, sometimes we forget that, we have capable teams around us who can also serve as business partners, but also help in moving the agenda forward. So, getting our teams engaged, mobilizing them. Delegation is another important sort of practice that one needs to continue to work on. Sometimes we forget that. I think that helps kind of, balancing sort of managing these priorities while maintaining a certain level of trust engagement or healthy workplace culture where, everyone, not everyone, I should say that, but, your core teams feel like they're engaged and, they're contributing to managing business priorities. So I think, power of teams is also important if, other than communication, yeah, I think we've discussed some of the other sort of practices before.
Yeah, I like how you framed that because I was going to ask you if you had any advice to give to leaders who feel they're being pulled in so many directions, but I like what you had said about delegation and working with your team to move things along. That's great.
One very recent example being, as I mentioned, we are going through a massive transformation, and there were periods when I was a little overwhelmed, and I thought, oh my goodness, how am I going to lead the change across these 100,000 plus employees? And, taking a step back and gathering a team who you trust, who can roll up the sleeves and get things done has accelerated the pace of work so much. And also built very strong connection with the business, because sometimes we think, oh, we have to do it all, but you've got a team that are extension of you, are helping you do it all.
Yeah, I think we're all guilty of that a little bit sometimes.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you, Lena. So we talked about leadership, how leaders can build trust through uncertain times, employee experience, navigating competing priorities. But what I'd really like to do is end on, the future of leadership. So as the world of work continues to evolve, what leader capabilities will be the most critical over the next 3 to 5 years? And what advice would you leave today with the leaders today on the call? Mark, you get to start this time.
I get this one. All right. So it's a very interesting question as well, and it's always interesting to try to anticipate the future. I won't say predict.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that, and maybe I touched on this in one of my earlier comments. I think that the world will become more ambiguous for people as the pace of change continues to accelerate. Mm-hmm. And I think that with the introduction of AI and its infiltration into work processes, into jobs, etc., it will be quite unsettling for some people. And so I think that beyond all the core stuff that we've been talking about this morning, that still exists and is just maybe even more important and if sometimes more challenging to implement effectively. I think even more than ever, leaders are going to have to learn to deal with ambiguity. And to make changes sort of in the midst of uncertainty, and I would recommend sort of going back to a values-based approach. We talked about culture and the importance of culture. We talked about balancing priorities. I think leaders will have to be less technical and more value-focused, make decisions based on the intended outcomes without necessarily knowing that there's a path here, right? Sometimes there are well-established ways to do things. I think this will be less and less true in many areas going forward, particularly over the next 5 to 10 years as we sort of work through as a global community through AI implementation and all of the shocks that will cause at the same time as the world economy is being completely upended through different changes in the global political situation. And so I would just say, if it's advice that you're asking me for, I would say accept the fact that things will be ambiguous, accept the fact that things will be new. Trust, that Lena says, trust your people, delegate where you have to, and make decisions based on values, because there won't be a right answer for a whole bunch of stuff, even more so than there isn't now.
Yeah, there'll be a lot of needing to adapt, but maybe also some unlearning that some leaders will have to do.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Lena, anything to add?
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think the ability to manage ambiguity is probably one of the most challenging competency to develop. It's like, I think most people struggle with it. And I agree with Mark that, I think we just have to, if there's an area that we can sort of build capabilities for ourselves and for our teams is how do you deal with ambiguity? I think one of the advantages of technology is that it also can help you make more objective decisions, which is, if you use data as an example, right? So if you're talking about capabilities, how do you help your teams evaluate their decision making, their thinking through data? I think that's an area that we can all get better at. I think if we have to look at more in a technical terms, but going back to the fundamentals, I think there is more importance on building human connection and employee experience. I think regardless of where you are or whether you're on a virtual Teams call or you're in person, and I think it's even more important if you're working most of the time virtually and you're rarely in front of your teams. How do you create that employee experience? How do you create experience for your team so there is a connection? There is a sense of belonging. I think those are the capabilities, and it's amazing. Like, I love Copilot. I don't think I want to go back from Copilot. It helps me, but the time that I'm getting at my hand, do I want to just take it easy, or do I want to now have more sort of in person or more sort of one-on-one discussions with my team? I think there's more that we can do. The more technology we bring into our lives, the more time we have, but it's important to realize how we want to use that time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you both. That was my last question. I think it's a great place to end. I really appreciate both your perspectives. I'd love to now open it up to the floor to see if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask. You're welcome to come off mute and ask. I'm just going to take a look at the chat to see if anybody typed anything in there. Nope, nothing there. Anybody like to come off mute and ask Lena or Mark any questions? We did really good for timing. Hi, Tanya.
Yeah, very good for timing. Hi, it's Tanya here. Hi, Mark. Hi, Lena. What a fantastic discussion. I think you touched on a lot of themes and, gave a lot of direction and guidance so that we can better understand in other organizations as well, what to take a look at behind the scenes. Mark, I particularly liked how you said kind of analyzing what do we have on the go right now? Is it still a priority? Are we taking on too much? I think it's so important to evaluate that piece from an organizational level. And then Lena, to your points, I like that triangle that you brought up, the empathy, the accountability, The third one is lost on me right now. But I think these are all very important reminders for leaders and also for potential new leaders who are taking a look at how they continue to cultivate that culture and support team through changing landscapes as the business changes. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Tanya. It's actually authenticity, empathy, and logic. The 3 parts of a trust triangle.
I like that. I'm going to write those 3 down. I like that. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you, Tanya. If nobody else would like to come on, I'll stop the recording. But if anything comes up, you're very welcome to email me and I can address them to Lena and Mark. Stop the meeting. Stop recording.